What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to more Outriders. Now, today's quest is to provide the absolute, and I guarantee one of the absolute best beginner builds for Technomancers in regards to doing expeditions and endgame. So if you're thinking of starting a Technomancer and maybe you need some help with your current build, this is going to be exactly for you. Before we get started, I'd like to personally invite you to watch more Outriders guides, tips, endgame builds, and more just by tapping that subscribe button as I release daily videos, and wouldn't want you, of course, to miss out. Now, thank you so much for subscribing. You're absolutely awesome, and let's go ahead and get started with today's video. Alright, so as many Outriders have come to know, or maybe still are not aware, the Technomancer class is an absolutely insane class for support, DPS, or survival. Now, I'll admit I was a Trickster main at first, but playing even the small amount of hours I have so far with the Technomancer in expeditions has me ready to convert on a serious note. This build is intended for beginners, meaning those that are Technomancer and are either just starting expeditions, or maybe you're having trouble and need to switch up your current build in both solo and multiplayer. This build also works well if this is your first playthrough with Outriders, so if you can't decide where to spend your class points, look no further. In the next few days, I will be doing a more quote-unquote top tier adjustment to the build as I farm gear and get the right mods. Alright, so let's kick this off with talking a little bit about where to spend your class points. For this build, we're going to focus mainly on the Pestilence subclass, where we go for shorter long-range distance, reduced cooldowns for our decay skills, more assault rifle damage, and increased toxic damage. So feel free to pause the video at any time and copy the class nodes that I have selected on the screen. Now, this build, when in combat, is important to keep as far away from the enemy as possible. Therefore, we rely on nitrogen capsules to help decrease what is considered long range. This will keep our damage up while we keep our distance. Exposing toxins causes an enemy with the toxic status to also have the vulnerable status applied, which debuffs them considerably, allowing us to do more damage. Not to mention, marked for execution causes the vulnerable status to be 40% more effective. This, along with our blighted rounds and toxic buffs, are going to be doing some serious damage when in battle. Two sides of the power is going to increase our damage taken by 15%, but also increase what we deal by 20%. Next, our purge nodes increase damage upon enemies with the toxic status by 15% each, again adding to that insane damage we'll be doing. Moving on to skills, we have blighted rounds, cryo turret, and cold snap. Now, blighted rounds is honestly at the core of this build and what will allow us to not only dish out some insane damage, but also allow us to have way more survival because of healing. Remember that Technomancers heal as they deal damage, so the more damage done, the more healing that occurs, and since toxic is a status that stays on enemies, you're always really going to be healing. Blighted rounds will also be kept up for almost the entirety of our expeditions, and we won't need to rely on the cooldowns either, while our ammunition will be replenished too. Now, this is going to be very important to this build, probably the most important thing, but I'll get to this in a minute. But again, this is the real reason this build is so damn powerful. For our cryo turret, we are going to rely on this to not only deal damage, but mainly freeze enemies, and same with the cold snap, which freezes enemies around that little ice bomb that your Technomancer throws out into the field. It may seem unnecessary to have both the cryo turret and cold snap both being used. However, they are specifically chosen to help us with crowd control as we lay on the damage from blighted rounds. Not to mention, one of our mods will help give a bonus to shooting enemies that are also frozen. Now, with any build, there is talk of the skill rotations, and this differs a little bit, but here is what I'll say. Blighted rounds will and needs to be active all of the time. I'm going to underline that, bold that, whatever I can do to explain that blighted rounds needs to be active the entire time that you're dealing damage in the expedition. And you may be asking, how is that even possible, or how are you accomplishing this? And what I will say is, once we get to the mods, I will explain further. Now, this is the most important part of this build for outputting the most DPS and healing as well. Cryo turret can be used and thrown in the middle of large mobs or when you need some space between enemies, so use it as often as possible. Next, with cold snap, you really only want to use this if you're about to die and are overwhelmed with a lot of enemies surrounding you, or for crowd control to freeze a ton of enemies and down them each really fast with your blighted rounds. I've also used this a lot to help other allies in battle. Maybe I see that their health is going down a bit, they're surrounded by a lot of enemies, I'll throw that cold Cold Snap out and give them a chance to kind of get free and heal up. So again, use Cold Snap whenever it's available. Now, like I said in the beginning, there really is no use these skills in order like this 1, 2, 3. Rather, use your best judgment to stay long range, have crowd control, and keep up your blighted rounds. Now, moving on to weapon choice, without a doubt, LMGs are going to be your very best friend for this build because of blighted rounds, the extra 50% magazine capacity, and the ability to leverage 2 mods we really rely on heavily. Now, I would highly recommend you only use a rare LMG and not an epic or legendary until you reach tier 15 and have a level 50 LMG. The important reason is that you'll be able to upgrade your LMG with iron every time you reach the next tier in expeditions instead of needing titanium or drop pod resources for epics or legendaries. This allows your LMG to always be the maximum level and help deliver the best DPS. The only setback is that you don't have 2 mods on your weapon, but honestly, it's not as important as always keeping your weapon at maximum level. Next, let's move on to the mods, because I've been telling you guys this entire time, the 2 mods that we have in here are very important. So starting with critical analysis for an increase in crit damage by 15%, Frostbite to debuff enemy armor by 35% when frozen, which again is important for your cryo turret and Cold Snap. Bear mag to ensure if you don't manage to keep up your blighted rounds replenished in battle, you have another magazine with blighted on it. So that means basically if you shoot that entire, let's say you have 120 rounds in your LMG and for some reason it didn't replenish because you didn't kill an enemy or you weren't below 30% when you killed an enemy, it will reload the mag, but you'll still have blighted rounds on there. So you're safe for, you know, the next enemy, so that way you can get some smaller mobs down. Ice Pack is next to heal you and your allies when your cryo turret disappears. And the final 2 I want to talk a little bit more about in depth. So lastly, for the mods, we have Trick Up the Sleeve to replenish 30% of your ammo every killing shot, and Perpetuum Mobile, which replenishes your magazine if you kill an enemy with 35% or less ammo remaining in your magazine. These 2 mods are an absolute must for this build, as they both together keep up your blighted rounds for the entire expedition without having to activate the cooldown at all. Now, keep in mind, as long as you down enemies, your ammo will replenish as you see in the gameplay. So the trick is basically to take aim at the elites when possible, do as much damage as possible, but then rely on the smaller mobs to replenish your ammo. This will, for the most part, allow you to always have blighted rounds up, because it only resets when you reload, and since you're constantly restocking your magazine from those kills from those smaller enemies, you'll really never honestly have to reload in an expedition. Remember, you won't need to grab ammo from the boxes either, as that will stop your blighted rounds. So just go into the next fight, take out a couple smaller enemies or 2, and watch your ammo basically always stay full. Now, if you happen to run out of ammo because maybe the last enemy is an elite or the boss, don't sweat, because you have an extra clip of blighted rounds from your other mod. So there you have it, one badass Technomancer build for beginners or those looking for one that makes expeditions a whole hell of a lot easier. I went from tier 1 to tier 10 in a couple of hours just from this build alone, so I hope you guys enjoy it just as much as I am. Now, just to say this off script, I've played Pyromancer, I've played Trickster in expeditions. Technomancer, honestly, with this build at this moment, is probably my favorite. I'm having the most fun, and honestly, I want you guys to go ahead and give it a try and let me know what you think in the comments below. Or maybe you have another build that's even better, which would be astonishing, because I don't know how much better you can get with the Technomancer, but if you have a build that is better with the Technomancer, go ahead and put that in the comments below and let me know how much of a badass you are. Now, if you like more Outriders guides, tips, builds, farming methods, and more, just tap that subscribe button so I can send you those videos immediately as they release. We also have a small Discord with some Outrider players on all platforms, so if you're looking for some help or friends to tag along, check for that Discord link in the description below. My name is Silverback, our quest is complete, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.